FPL Game Week 11, my first transfer plans. Game Week 10 is almost over. Of course, we still have one game to go on Monday night. In today's video, we're going to have a look at how my team is lining up for Game Week 11 before I've made any transfers. Of course, in Game Week 10, I sold Erling Haaland, and we'll have a look at how my team is now lining up without him in there and how I plan on dealing with that over the next few weeks as well. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here. And today we're having a look at my first transfer plans going into Game Week 11. Of course, the big thing was in Game Week 10, I decided to sell Erling Haaland for Matheus Cunha. I kept Dominic Solanke and I brought in Mo Salah, who was my captain, for Mavididi in my midfield. That has gained me, I think, 29 points in a single game week. It is one of the luckiest swings I have ever had. And I can already know some of you in the comments will be saying, Harry, you just get lucky every week. And absolutely, this week I've been incredibly lucky. Dominic Haaland missed more chances. Salah with a fantastic finish for his goal. Like, Salah scoring, I don't think is particularly lucky, but Haaland missing chances is. I would have owned Cunha either way. He just got an assist. But then Dominic Solanke scoring twice, getting an assist for a free kick that James Maddison stuck in that he was fouled for, and just generally turning it on for the final 20 minutes of the game, having been very disappointing in the first 60 minutes. So, yes, very happy with the point, of course. I'm just recording it as a Chelsea fan, though, after our 1-1 draw. Probably the most boring game of the weekend against Manchester United. We'll talk about some of their players as well during this video because, of course, Manchester United have a nice run of fixtures coming up over the next few weeks. So, yes, Game Week 10, very lucky. I am just outside the top 100k. I've got one player left to play in Brian and Bumo. I don't have anyone else, so the chances are I don't make it inside the top 100k unless things go really well. Smith Rowe's got ownership and Raul Jimenez has also got ownership. So if Brian and Bumo outscores both of those considerably, then maybe I'll creep inside. But I'm expecting to be about 120, 130k by the end of the game week, which is still a really nice green arrow from 280k. And now, of course, we're setting up with a team that does not have Erling Haaland in it anymore, and what that means for my team over the next few weeks. So starting off in goal, we are currently planning on starting Fabianski at home to Everton over David Raya. David Raya is a goalkeeper I still like. They conceded from just one big chance against Newcastle on the early kickoff on Saturday. If not, that would have been a clean sheet. From game week 12, they have a really nice run. But for 1 week, and probably 1 week only, given I have Gabriel, I'm currently planning on starting Fabianski. Now, West Ham themselves have absolutely not been good so far this season, especially defensively, but I'm not sure I want to double up on Arsenal, and they do have Everton at home. So at the moment, I do plan on starting Fabianski. Into defence, Ryan Aït-Nouri, nothing for him at home to Crystal Palace, but does have Southampton at home this week. We're going to be starting Gabriel, and at the moment, we've got Rico Lewis. We're starting to see a few holes in my defence starting to form, and we will be focusing on transfers in that defence over the next couple of game weeks. Lewis did, of course, get dropped. We heard that Pep say he was really tired, but they didn't have anyone to bench him for. Pep said they have loads of injuries, and then suddenly back in the squad was Savinho, was Doku, was Kyle Walker, and Kevin De Bruyne out of absolute nowhere. And that does cause a little bit of a concern for Lewis. I still think he's first choice, but it does now have the ability to rotate him out, as they did at the weekend with Kyle Walker. And of course, I don't have Gvardiol in my team. Unfortunately, I cannot afford to go from Lewis to Gvardiol based on my selling price. I'm 0.1 million short of that transfer. Mykolenko on the bench is okay. They have a difficult run of fixtures coming in a few weeks, though. And Greaves, of course, is injured and plays for Ipswich. So generally, my defence is looking a little bit fragile. But the good thing is, I think my attack, my front eight, including Semenyo on the bench, looks fantastic. Now, in game week 10, I did bench Semenyo for his 10-pointer against Manchester City. There was no one in my starting 11. I reasonably could have started him over. Maybe Saka away at Newcastle. Palmer also blanked, but realistically, I was never going to play Semenyo. So that is what it is. And he's currently on the bench again this week away at Brentford. And if Brentford look poor defensively again on Monday night, I might have to find a way to start him in my starting 11. If you would start him over one of my starting players, let me know. Some people have mentioned on Twitter maybe benching Bukayo Saka away at Chelsea. I don't think that's going to be the case. Palmer, Saka and Mo Salah is now a very strong midfield that I really like the look of for the long term. Don't massively think I need to be changing that too much, as with the front three in Solanke, Wood and Cunha. And with Semenyo on the bench every week, that is a very strong front eight that will probably give me a strong first sub pretty much every single game week. So the 1 free transfer and the 1.3 million in the bank is most likely to be used on defenders over the next few weeks. Cunha, I love for the long-term fixtures. Wood, I like because I've owned him for the start of the season. He scored again this week, but there are some difficult games coming up on the horizon. I don't think I'll be selling him, but it's one to keep an eye on. And then Dominic Solanke. I still plan on moving Solanke off at some point, but of course Ipswich at home this week is not the week to do it. So just having a look at a few players I'm considering. Just to start off actually in option 2, which is moving out Dominic Solanke. Of course, I don't plan on doing it this week because the 2 transfer targets I have are both playing Arsenal and Manchester City this week. Danny Welbeck continues to perform well at Brighton, and from game week 12, they have a really nice run of fixtures. And the other one is Jackson, a blank for him against Manchester United, but from game week 12, again, a really nice run of fixtures. And despite Solanke's poor form before this game, he did just get 2 goals and an assist, and he does have Ipswich at home this week. So I don't plan on selling Solanke this week, but going into game week 12, I do think it's probably a transfer I will use over the international break. The other one that's not on here that I could look at is Alexander Isak of Newcastle. Injury record over the past season is not fantastic though, and we've seen it again recently. There has still been doubts with his fitness, but from game week 12, they also start a pretty nice run of fixtures, so he is one that I've got my eye on. Also at Newcastle, moving into the defenders is where I plan on using a transfer, maybe this week or maybe next week. First one is Lewis Hall. He's 4.3 and he's starting pretty much every week. They go away to Nottingham Forest this week though, and I don't expect a clean sheet there. From game week 12 onwards is one that I'll have a look at. Generally though, I'm looking at some of the big clubs in inverted commas in terms of potential players to buy. The first one is Konate at Liverpool. He did go off with what we thought was a bad shoulder injury, but he has posted on Instagram that he expects to be back for the next game. I could buy him going into game week 11. Aston Villa at home. Is that a massive upgrade on potentially? It would probably be Rico Lewis that I would bench going into this fixture. I could bench Gabriel, but Gabriel has history of scoring against Chelsea, so I'm not going to do that. So in terms of making the transfer this week, I need to know whether the defender is better than Rico Lewis going away to Brighton. So Konate at home to Aston Villa is maybe slightly better, but maybe not massively enough to go and force a transfer there. Diego Dallo, probably better at home to Leicester this week. Manchester United also a nice run over the next 3, likely to get a new manager. Didn't look fantastic defensively against Chelsea. Chelsea didn't create that much, but it's still one I've got my eye on and probably my favourite Manchester United defender that I could buy. Gvardiol is one I would love to buy, but I don't really have a route to go and buy him unless I was to sell Gabriel, which I'm not going to do with their fixtures coming up. I do have a potential route to him if I was to sell maybe a couple of defenders, but generally I don't have an easy way to go and get him, but I think it's worth mentioning that I would like to buy him. And the final one we've got at the moment is Reece James. He's played back-to-back 90s. I don't think I'm going to go and buy him just based off the bad injury record, but from game week 12 onwards, Chelsea do have a really nice run of fixtures. You could look at Gusto, Cucurella. That's the issue. 3 good fullbacks rotating for 2 positions. You could go cheap and buy someone like Levi Colwill. You could go cheap and buy someone like a Fofana as well. My only concern with that, though, is they don't offer enough attacking threat and we're not watertight defensively. So in terms of ones I really look at buying, I like Lewis Hall at his price and he might be a good Mikalenko replacement, but he goes away to Forest this week, so I'm not going to buy that this week. Gvardiol goes away to Brighton and I could only buy him for a hit or I was going to sell Gabriel, so I don't want to do that this week. Definitely not going to buy Reece James at home to Arsenal. So it is really Dallo and Konate that I look as potential transfers in for me this week. Dallo is definitely an upgrade. Has good short-term fixtures over the next 3. Then they get a little bit more difficult again. So I'd have to make sure it rotates well with the rest of my defenders. Konate feels like the best long-term buy because Liverpool do continue to look really, really strong defensively. Just before we go back and have a look at my team once again, let's have a look at some of your early questions that you were asking, both on the YouTube community section and on Twitter as well. Thank you all very much for sending them in. The first one is going to be, what should you do with Erling Haaland? Now, for me, having sold him this week, it's very easy for me to sit here again and say, well, he's blanked again, but he did get a lot of chances. Brighton away is still a good fixture with, of course, a very big lack of centre-backs at the moment. No dunk is going to have a massive boost on Erling Haaland. They are getting players like Kevin De Bruyne back. If you'd have told me before the deadline that De Bruyne, Savinho and Doku would be back in the Manchester City squad, I almost certainly wouldn't have sold Erling Haaland, and that's probably where I stand with it again. Now, if you think that your team structure, it looks better without him, then absolutely. If this is the week to go and sell him, I'm not certain. Brighton away versus Salah with a potential home fixture against Aston Villa. It might depend on what the other move is. Who is the midfielder that you're going to sell to upgrade to Salah? If you're starting them and they don't have a good fixture, then maybe go and sell, do the move if you fancy it. But if you've got a Brown and Burma away at Brentford and a Haaland away at Brighton, I don't think I'd use 2 transfers to go and buy Mo Salah, for example, that week. So I think I would hold off on it and probably do it over the international break and give Haaland a week to see what he does with the returnees from injury. Next up is what to do about Spurs. So of course, We had a goal for Brennan Johnson. We had an assist for Son, who did get taken off after 55 minutes. We had the haul for Dominic Solanke, and Maddison didn't start, but they do have a good fixture at home to Ipswich. Personally, if you have Son, if you have Maddison, if you have Kulusevski, if you have Brennan Johnson, if you have Solanke, if you have any of the attackers, and if you have the defenders as well, if you have Pedro Porro, you have to hold them for Ipswich at home. No, none of us are going to be selling him before Ipswich at home. The big question comes is, A, do you buy them? Which I probably don't think I would, because after that, 2 of the next 3 after that are pretty difficult, and I think I would just let it go. We're not certain on the minutes enough for Son. Solanke is still frustrating, apart from that very big flurry at the end. You look in the midfielders, you're not buying Maddison, you're not buying Kulusevski. The only one is Brennan Johnson, who's still decent at his price, but probably not a week to go and buy him, I don't think. I think I would stay clear of buying them. And then in game week 12, a lot of us, including myself, will still look to sell them despite that turnaround. Because a week ago, when they lose to Palace, we know they have that performance in them. And I don't necessarily want that in my team long term. And then finally, looking at cheap forwards, this ties into the Haaland question a little bit, is should you be moving him down, and what are the best cheap forwards? So the ones I've really highlighted are, you've got Cunha, you've got Strand Larsen of Wolves, Chris Wood, Welbeck, Jackson, Visa, Jimenez. If you want to go up a little bit, you can include the likes of Alexander Isak and even maybe Dominic Solanke in there. But I wouldn't be buying Solanke. At Wolves, I still think Cunha is worth the money. Yes, Strand Larsen scored. Cunha got the assist. Cunha got man of the match. He created several other big chances that could have been finished. Cunha is still the number 1 pick at that price and has Southampton at home this week. Strand Larsen, I like if you need a cheaper option, but I would prefer Danny Welbeck in that price bracket now. I also like Visa. Jimenez is good, but I prefer Visa over Jimenez just because of the amount of goals I expect Brentford to score compared to the likes of Fulham. But watch them on Monday night and maybe make up your mind. If you have money for Jackson or Isak, I quite like that from game week 12 onwards. And Chris Wood is just consistent. So just to wrap that up, Cunha is definitely number 1. Danny Welbeck is probably number 2 from game week 12 onwards. Then you're looking at Chris Wood, Visa, and Jackson, probably pretty close. If you have the money for Jackson, maybe you want to look there. Then it is Jimenez. And Strand Larsen, despite scoring this week, is probably my least favourite. So just to wrap that up, as a reminder, before we talk about my team, my podcast, Know the Score, will be back on Monday evening, every single Monday at 6 p.m. It's just a roundup of all the Premier League games. We talk about the sort of hot topics from the weekend. So if you have any of those you want discussing, leave it in the comment section down below. I'll leave a link above and in the description down below. The support you've shown on it is so appreciated. And the feedback every single week, you're telling me how much you love it, which is just, yeah, really, really appreciated. And you're all loving Luke, who I do it with, who is an actor and a comedian as well, is so funny. So if you haven't checked it out already, please do give it a chance. It will be out at 6 p.m. this evening. I'll post it on the YouTube community section and on Twitter as well. If you haven't tried it, please do give it a try, or over the international break as well. But looking at my team, a front 8, I'm hoping I don't have to touch that much over the next few weeks, apart from maybe selling Solanke after the Ipswich game. The transfers are going to be used to focus on the defence. I like Aït-Nouri and I like Gabriel. The other 3 in Lewis, Mykolenko and Greaves, I do think are a little bit of an issue. I am considering potentially doing Mykolenko up to someone like Adalo or a Konate and keeping Lewis in place, but also potentially doing something like a Greaves up to a Lewis Hall as well, and trying to give myself a little bit of depth over the next few weeks as well. So although I've got a pretty strong structure, I do think there are transfers I'm going to use. I don't really have an obvious route back to Haaland, and if he goes and bangs 3 goals in against Brighton, I'll absolutely have to consider a way, but I think I'm going to go with this for the next few weeks now. Of course, it's easy to say that after the week that we've just had, and the luck that I did have this week. So I am focusing on Lewis, Mykolenko and Greaves over the next few weeks. Solanke potentially to another forward like a Jackson or an Isak, or coming down to someone like a Danny Welbeck if I wanted some more money for my defence as well. But clean sheets are pretty difficult to predict at the moment. So that is it. I actually plan at the moment, most likely as I roll my transfer, I could do Mykolenko to Konate or Mykolenko to Dalot with 1 free transfer and bench Lewis. That's also probably slightly likely, but I would say it's 60% chance I just roll the transfer and play Lewis, Gabriel and Aït-Nouri this week and take 2 transfers into the international break, see what happens, see if I get any injuries, see what happens with the new Manchester United manager and everything like that. So plan is to roll the transfer, but I do have a few things moving on the horizon as potential transfers. Drop any questions you have in the comment section down below. As I said, if you need more content, the podcast will be out this evening. Any questions about your team, let me know what you would do with my team as well. If I answered your question in the key questions, then just drop a thumbs up in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here. And I'll be back again very soon.